Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off when the janitor asked if I was the lady who controls the lasers. That's how mythical my job had become. To most people at Tenetrix Systems, I was just the quiet woman in the corner office with blackout blinds, 2 monitors running Linux, and a keyboard so old it still had beige keys. I didn't do all-hands meetings. I didn't show up to karaoke nights. I kept the entire company from digitally imploding every day before lunch. My name is Susan, and for 12 years I held the keys, literally. The root of trust, they call it. Most folks think it's a server in a cold room with blue lights and humming fans. Nope, it's a tiny black box bolted to my desk, and if you don't treat it right, it turns into Fort Knox with a grudge. Now, I know what you're thinking. Crypto officer? What is this, Mission Impossible? Calm down, Jason Bourne. It's just IT with better gloves. My job wasn't sexy. It was slow, methodical, paranoid by design. I didn't invent the hardware security module. We called it the HSM, but I knew it like I knew the sound of my own cat coughing up a hairball. Every key rotation, every access log, every compliance report funneled through me. I had scripts that hadn't been touched in 5 years, but still screamed if someone tried anything sketchy. My world was one of air-gapped networks, dual-auth USPs, and laminated do not touch signs duct taped to the server racks. And yet, despite my daily flirtation with paranoid protocol, I found a weird kind of peace in it all. It's hard to explain, but there's a quiet power in knowing your job doesn't just matter. It anchors everything. The developers swaggered around with their Docker containers and CI/CD pipelines. Marketing folks threw cybersecurity into every pitch deck. But when it came time for the SOC 2 audits, or those little red envelopes from government partners labeled urgent, guess whose office they knocked on? Mine. They didn't always understand what I did, but they respected that I knew what I was doing. You don't mess with the person who signs the chain of trust. It's like poking a bear whose nap schedule controls your payroll system. Anyway, if you're into stories where smug people get slapped by their own arrogance, and trust me, this one goes nuclear, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We've got a whole team digging through the corporate graveyard to bring you these digital disasters, and your support keeps the caffeine flowing and the stories coming. And considering 93% of y'all just listen without subscribing, come on, it's one button. Do it for Susan. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, comfort zone. Mine was a 9x11 box with no windows, a biometric safe, and a coffee maker I'd programmed to only brew after verifying a passphrase. I had a setup that worked. I showed up at 7:43 every morning, checked cert expiry schedules, scanned logs, ran a few redundant backups, and usually fixed 3 other people's problems before they'd even opened their inboxes. Only people who truly got what I did were the ones who quietly sent me thank you emails after a vendor panic or a server hiccup got shut down before lunch. No big speeches. Just appreciate you, Susan. That was enough. I wasn't in it for glory. I was in it for order, for precision, for not getting woken up at 2 a.m. because some intern fat-fingered a wildcard cert. Then came the 6th CTO. That's not hyperbole. Had outlasted 5 of them, each with their own vision, optimization plans, and linked in bravado. This one, though, he came in hot. Ex-fintech, buzzword happy, allergic to humility. First week on the job, he did a floor walk with a dozen sycophants and asked me, loud enough for the interns to hear, so you just do. Encryption stuff. I smiled politely. I managed the digital trust anchors for the enterprise environment, including yours. Laughed like I'd told a dad joke. Didn't ask a follow-up. Just kept walking, tossing a stress ball with the company logo like he was already planning the reorg. That was the first crack. Not the laugh, not the disrespect. The fact that he didn't ask anything. I've had auditors with less clearance ask deeper questions. This one didn't care what I did, only that I existed, which meant, in his mind, I was replaceable. Here's the thing about people like that. They never realize what you do until it breaks, until the lights flicker, until the one little box doesn't respond, until the alarms start blaring at 9:01 on a Monday morning, and someone realizes that what you deleted wasn't just a user account, it was the heartbeat of the whole damn system. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, I was just Susan, the lady in the corner, one who wore the same gray cardigan and always declined cake in the break room. The one nobody noticed until they noticed too late. The first time he called me the key lady, I thought it was a joke, some light banter. New CTO trying to be relatable in that tech bro kinda way, slacks too tight, sneakers too clean, hair gel doing more project management than his actual calendar. But by the third meeting, when he rolled his eyes and said, "We really need one person guarding the sacred encryption box," I knew the wolf was sharpening his PowerPoint. His name was Ryder. No, really, Ryder, like he was born to sell crypto NFTs or runaway work knockoff from a yacht. Came in talking about streamlining, vendor consolidation, and how in fintech we didn't do it this way. Every time he opened his mouth, I could hear a case study dying. But the board loved him, called him a necessary disruptor, that he'd bring Tenetrix into the cloud era, which is corporate speak for he's gonna fire the people who built the damn place and outsource the pieces he doesn't understand. Within 2 weeks, I noticed the pattern. My calendar started filling up with meetings labeled alignment syncs. HR showed up to my one-on-ones just to observe. Ryder asked me to document the HSM procedures for training purposes. It's like asking a pilot to explain which buttons not to press during turbulence. He said it with that fake charming smile, like we were on the same team. But I know what documentation really means in corporate dialect. We're firing you, but first, tell us everything so we can replace you with Chad from LinkedIn Learning. He wanted to know where the root key was stored. I laughed. You mean the master key shares? Securely escrowed per policy. Know that if you read the binder I gave you. He didn't laugh back. Just nodded, tapped something into his tablet, and muttered, "We'll want to get a vendor involved." Vendor. Always the same damn playbook. Outsource the thing you don't understand to a company that promises a dashboard, 5 buzzwords, and a 3-year contract that costs more than everyone's salary combined. It wasn't about efficiency. It was about control. Couldn't stand the idea that a system existed that he didn't own or couldn't explain over brunch. The rumors started fast. I overheard a product manager whispering in the kitchen, "Did you hear they're migrating the security stack to some vendor in Austin?" Someone else asked me directly if I was training my replacement. I just smiled and said, "They'd better hope not." See, here's the secret no one on Ryder's new transition team grasped. You can't lift and shift trust. Doesn't work like that. The HSM doesn't care about your Ockers or your Jira tickets. It only knows who signed the keys, who verified the chain, and who owns the thumb that touches the damn scanner. Every system tied to it, VPN auth, internal API certs, firmware update channels, they all rely on one thing, continuity. And you don't get continuity by slapping a new badge on the problem and praying it doesn't notice. But Ryder didn't want to hear that. He wanted diagrams, spreadsheets, simple answers. He once asked, "Can we just reset the whole thing? Like it was a Google password." I told him, "Sure. Just destroy all trust relationships and invalidate every certificate we've issued since 2015. Should only take a few months to rebuild, assuming no one sues." He didn't like that answer. The next day, someone from legal asked if I had ever considered early retirement. That's when I started making copies. Out of secrets, never that. I'm not stupid. But of every email, every meeting invite, every compliance memo I'd written, I backed them up to a private archive with timestamps, signatures, and cross-references. Not for revenge, for survival. Because when people like Ryder take control, they don't blame themselves when things go wrong. They blame the last person who actually knew how anything worked. And the funny thing, nobody else seemed to notice the fire he was lighting. The dev team was too busy trying to implement his new zero-trust framework with no budget. The project managers were reshuffling decks, pretending the ship wasn't listing. Even HR just kept scheduling pulse checks and wellness chats, as if the smell of gasoline wasn't already leaking out of the air vents. But I noticed, because I built this house, and I knew exactly which beams he was sawing through in his rush to redecorate. He wanted disruption. Oh, honey, it was coming. They scheduled the meeting for 8:30 a.m. Not 9, not mid-morning, not after coffee had a chance to claw the fog out of your skull. 8:30 sharp, like they wanted the betrayal to taste fresh. The invite subject line was a masterpiece of HR euphemism, role realignment discussion. Location, conf room B12. That's the one with no windows. The air conditioning always runs too cold, and the table is just wide enough to make eye contact uncomfortable. I showed up on time, not a minute early, not a second late. Wore my usual cardigan, gray, comfortable, unassuming. Like me, I suppose. The room was already occupied, HR rep with a generic empathetic face, and Ryder pretending not to scroll his phone. His smile when I walked in, kind of brittle, tight-lipped thing that says we rehearsed this 6 times, but it's still gonna be awkward. Hi, Susan, HR started, like we were old friends reconnecting at a funeral. Thanks for coming in. We'll try not to take too much of your time. Translation: we're about to blow up your life and want to be done before the bagels arrive. Ryder cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a TED talk. Been doing some strategic reassessment of our internal capabilities and future vendor partnerships. And after careful consideration, we've decided your role is being sunsetted. Sunsetted. I looked at him and deadpanned. Do I get to ride a horse off into the cloud? He blinked. HR coughed into her hand. We're offering a standard transition package, she continued, hanging a folder in front of me like it contained anything but boilerplate bullshit and a non-disparagement clause. Your system's access will be deactivated as of this meeting. We'll need your fob, laptop, and access badge before you leave. And then, as if she'd been waiting all morning to say it, she smiled. Smirked, really, and the fob. Don't think we'd forget your little door opener. That was the moment I realized none of them knew what they'd done. I thought the fob was a convenience, a key to a closet, a relic of some legacy workflow I'd cling to like a boomer with a flip phone. What they didn't understand, what no one in that room even asked, was that the fob wasn't just for opening doors. It was cryptographically paired to my biometric identity as part of the hardware security module's trust chain. It was me. Moving it was the same as detonating the bridge between their systems and the one thing they could never replace, continuity. But I didn't say that. Not then. I nodded, quietly, took off my badge, placed the fob on the table like a loaded weapon, powered down the laptop and slid it across. Ryder picked it up like he expected it to explode. Maybe he should have. I signed the exit paperwork without reading it. Not because I didn't care, because I already had copies of the things that mattered, the audits, the risk assessments, the license clauses. Especially the one that clearly stated that, without an authorized continuity keyholder, the HSM would eventually self-lock for security purposes. They wouldn't know when, but it was coming. I stepped into the hallway like I just walked out of a dentist appointment. Calm, detached, numb, in that way you get when your body hasn't caught up to the adrenaline yet. People avoided my eyes. One brave soul from the dev team mumbled something about coffee sometime. I nodded, knowing we both never meant it. Security met me at the elevator like I was a bank robber, even though I'd built the system that secured their paychecks. I didn't speak. They didn't either. Just rode down in silence to the lobby, where someone handed me a cardboard box with my name scribbled on the side in Sharpie. Inside was a potted plant, stress ball shaped like a server, and a mug that said encrypt everything. Outside, the wind hit different. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, not even from anger, from the restraint it took not to laugh right there on the sidewalk, because they thought they'd won, thought they'd erased me, thought some shiny new vendor was going to walk in, press a few buttons, and do my job with an app and a dashboard. But they hadn't just removed a person. They'd removed the anchor. The HSM, bless its paranoid little circuits, was designed to respond exactly as I taught it. The countdown had already started. They just didn't know it yet. The first hiccup hit 48 hours after I left. I was on my couch in sweatpants, sipping lukewarm coffee and half watching a documentary about ancient Egyptian embalming when my old phone lit up. Not the work phone they confiscated, my personal number, which only a handful of people at Tenetrix ever had. The text was from Ryan, a junior engineer I'd mentored once, mostly by accident, after he asked what a CRL was, and I gave him a 3-hour explanation that ended in a whiteboard diagram and 2 printed RFCs. Hey, do you know why we're getting failbacks on root cert sync? I laughed, just one dry exhale through my nose, but it felt like cracking a knuckle you didn't know was stiff. Didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, because I couldn't. The moment they revoked my access and terminated my employment, I became a non-trusted entity in the chain. Every keystroke, every reply, even a seemingly innocent suggestion could be seen as a breach. Legally, ethically, professionally, I was out, and that meant the problem was all theirs now. From the outside, I could only imagine the escalation tree, systems trying to rotate certificates, failing to validate the root of trust because the continuity was broken. The backups wouldn't load because the signing key required a validation token that only existed inside the HSM. The HSM, they'd orphaned the moment they pried my fob out of my hand like it was a garage clicker. And it was just the beginning. By day 3, I started hearing things from friends who still worked there, but were smart enough not to email. Slack channels filled with red error messages, DevOps running manual retries in production, APIs returning 400 threes and 400 ones like they were candy on Halloween. The VPN tunnels were dropping connections randomly, triggering mass reconnects and throttling the entire internal network. The best part, none of it was broken. Not really. It was all working exactly as designed. The trust chain had been violated. The protocols were protecting the company from the company. Here's the kicker. I had done everything by the book. Before I left, I'd run final integrity checks, documented key lifespans, stored my audit logs in the archive, alerted legal that escrow hadn't been configured per Ryder's cost-saving decision. I even sent one last message to IT Ops noting that without an appointed successor before revocation, the system would default to seal mode after 72 hours. I got a thumbs-up emoji in response. When they stumbled into a full-blown cert crisis, it wasn't sabotage. It wasn't negligence. It was physics. You don't unplug the battery and act surprised when the lights go out. The vendor support tickets started flying next, somehow even slower than the internal fire drills. I heard Ryder tried to open a P1 incident with the HSM provider. They responded with their standard message. Per license terms, administrative continuity must be ensured prior to identity revocation. Please refer to Section 4.1.2 of your contract. And still, no one said my name. It's funny, really, how fast a legacy becomes a ghost when it makes the wrong people uncomfortable. No one wanted to admit that the system didn't trust them anymore. Because to say that out loud would mean acknowledging that they'd built nothing to replace me, just deleted me and hoped the software didn't notice. But it did. The HSM noticed, the certificate authority noticed, the timestamp server noticed, even the firmware update channel, which hadn't been touched since 2018, noticed and politely declined to authenticate its own patch cycle. Like a nervous butler locking every door in the house because it didn't recognize the footsteps anymore. I didn't take joy in the chaos. Not exactly. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing I hadn't failed. They had. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about infrastructure. When it's working, no one thanks you. When it breaks, no one blames themselves. They blame the absence of you. And I had become very, very absent. It happened at exactly 9:01 a.m. on Monday. Not 9 o'clock. Not 9:05. The system doesn't run on vibes. It runs on atomic clocks. A timestamp was hard-coded into the trust expiry chain, the same one I'd maintained for 12 straight years without so much as a hiccup. And when it hit, the HSM, my beautiful, paranoid little black box, did exactly what it was supposed to do when abandoned. It shut its doors. I imagined the moment like a movie scene. Somewhere in the server room, a low hum stopped. Not loud, not dramatic, just stopped. Maybe a green light turned red. Maybe no one even noticed for the first 60 seconds. But then came the real consequences. APIs that had been limping along on cached certs finally reached their reauth intervals and failed. Database connectors refused to handshake. Containerized services began throwing unauthorized like confetti. Jenkins jobs died mid-deploy. Code that had passed QA the night before now stalled at cannot verify signature. By 9:15 a.m., Slack outage channel had 43 engineers in it. By 9:20, someone added hash root disruption crisis. By 9:30, they'd stopped naming the channels and started yelling in all caps. The kicker, the HSM wasn't even broken. It wasn't hacked. It didn't crash. It simply didn't trust them anymore. And why would it? The root administrator it had been cryptographically paired with for over a decade, me, had been removed without succession. No biometric, no token, no continuity ceremony, no signed authorization chain. You don't just become a trusted operator. You're verified into it, slowly, painfully, with rituals, approvals, logged fingerprints, and 3 layers of paranoia. The CTO, in his infinite fintech wisdom, had deleted all of that with a single offboarding email and a smug HR escort. So now the HSM was in seal mode. And Tenetrix Systems was dead in the water. Ryder tried the obvious things first. Restore from backup. Reboot the VPN concentrators. Reissue certificates. Except, whoops, the backup restoration system required a signature validation from the master key, which only lived inside the sealed HSM, which only responded to a valid trust anchor, which didn't exist anymore. Someone from infrastructure tried an emergency fallback protocol, relied on a secondary signing script that I had archived 3 years ago, but it was locked in a secure folder, only accessible via two-factor token approval from me. I could almost hear the panic from my condo, where I was making oatmeal and watering a succulent named Kafka. Emails started bouncing. Internal dashboards blinked out. At some point, the CI/CD pipeline entered an infinite loop of trying to deploy unsigned builds, crashing, trying again, like a snake swallowing its own insecure tail. And still, no one said my name, not in the calls, not in the logs, not in the growing war room channel where Ryder was reportedly exploring vendor escalations. Nope, they talked around me like I was a ghost, like invoking my name might summon a lawsuit or worse, a sense of accountability. I was watching it all from a distance, piecing things together from breadcrumbs. LinkedIn post from a frazzled engineer, rough morning. Anyone have experience with cert chain resets in sealed systems? A tweet from someone in InfoSec, PSA, if you offboard your root admin, maybe plan a handover first. One of the posts even had a meme, a screenshot of padlocked vault with the caption, when your HSM doesn't vibe with the new guy. I sipped my coffee and let it all wash over me. Not with joy, not with revenge, just peace, 'cause now it was official. I hadn't failed. I hadn't left a mess. I hadn't even made a mistake. They had simply removed the one thing that made the whole fragile Rube Goldberg machine trust itself, me. And now the machine didn't. By noon, they were out of duct tape. Not literal duct tape, though someone probably tried to reboot the firewall with a paperclip and a prayer, but metaphorical. The kind of slapdash fixes companies throw together in desperation, like hard-coding temporary certs, hot-swapping configs mid-flight, and praying no one notices the internal wiki is now loading without HTTPS. The war room was reportedly full. I heard that from a former colleague who messaged me a single emoji. Fire. Said Ryder was pacing like a coked-up rooster, arms flailing, barking half-formed tech buzzwords at a whiteboard full of arrows, timestamps, and increasingly desperate question marks. Pulled in folks from infrastructure, compliance, DevOps, even marketing, because apparently someone thought messaging strategy was going to fix a full-blown trust collapse. The internal call logs must have been comedy gold. By 1:00 p.m., they'd called the HSM vendor. 5 times. First time, they asked how to force unlock the trust container. The rep paused, then asked if the new admin was already registered and validated. Ryder reportedly said, working on that. Wrong answer. The vendor read from the playbook, section 4.3.1 of the license agreement, which Ryder had never opened. Once a trust anchor is revoked without a validated successor, system access is permanently restricted. Liability is voided if escalation procedures are not followed prior to revocation. In simpler terms, they pulled the plug, and now the vendor couldn't help. You could almost hear the blood drain from Ryder's face. Tried escalating. We've got critical systems down, production environments stalled, and active contracts depending on access. This is catastrophic. The vendor's support lead was polite but unmovable. We understand the urgency. Unfortunately, our hands are tied. The trust path was broken unilaterally. We were not notified of a change request. Our legal department has already reviewed your termination timeline. Translation: you broke it. You bought it. Back inside Tenetrix, the internal Slack channels were chaos. One engineer posted a link to a Stack Overflow thread from 2014 that might as well have been written in Latin. A product manager suggested rolling back to yesterday's config, only to be told that yesterday's config was now considered unsigned and therefore untrusted. Someone else tried spinning up a new key pair manually, except the system rejected the cert chain outright. No anchor, no dice. Is everything tied to her? Ryder finally shouted during an all-hands dev call. It wasn't a question, it was a tantrum. And the answer was simple because that's how you approved it. Every compliance doc, every system design, every audit trail, they all pointed to me, not because I insisted, but because no one ever challenged it. I offered training sessions, cross-coverage drills. Hell, I even floated a deputy keyholder program once. Got ignored every time. Ryder himself had dismissed it as paranoia theater. Now, the paranoia was putting on a sold-out Broadway show. HR panicked too. Their inboxes lit up with questions from legal, the board, and a few Tier 1 clients who were suddenly noticing a cascade of login failures and expired tokens across production environments. Someone in marketing sent out a vague, scheduled maintenance tweet, got radioed in under an hour by furious customers who just lost service. By late afternoon, someone, I can only guess legal, dug up the admin continuity policy and highlighted the part where all transitions required a 96-hour escrow protocol and vendor verification window, which, of course, Ryder had skipped entirely in his rush to sunset legacy roles. That clause, by the way, was the one I'd flagged in a memo 8 months earlier. Subject line, trust chains require time. It had been marked as low priority, so now they had no admin, no backups, no vendor liability, and no idea how to explain any of this without saying the one thing that made them look even dumber than they already did, that this entire meltdown started with a smirk in a conference room and ended with them firing the only person who knew where the matches were stored. It started with a knock, not on my door, in my inbox. A short, vaguely apologetic email from someone in legal I barely remembered. Subject line, quick clarification request. Attached was a PDF titled Compliance Audit Response Draft, Confidential. I didn't open it, not right away. I just stared at it for a moment, let the irony sink in. After weeks of silence, after being walked out like a liability, stripped of my access like a rogue agent, I was now the recipient of a polite corporate nudge, asking for help. No apology, no admission, just an unspoken hope I'd be a good little soldier one last time. The message itself was short. Hi, Susan. We're conducting some internal cleanup ahead of our compliance deadline. A few questions came up around key continuity protocols, specifically your offboarding timeline and the HSM licensing terms. Could we possibly schedule a quick Zoom just to clarify some technical points for the record? This would be informal, of course. Informal, right, like asking someone to disarm a bomb just as a favor. I replied 6 hours later. Attached a different PDF, an excerpt from my original exit memo. Highlighted in yellow was the clause where I had explicitly reminded Ryder, in writing, declining escrow and skipping the continuity ceremony would trigger default seal mode upon admin revocation. I wrote only one sentence beneath it. Per policy and section 6.2 of the HSM admin charter, I am not authorized to discuss secure key material or related access methods after trust revocation. No greeting, no sign-off, no Zoom. I didn't need to yell. The silence spoke louder. They were under audit. That much was clear now, probably from a government partner, maybe even a federal compliance body. Failed cert validation shows up fast in high-security contracts. You miss one rotation deadline, and suddenly some quiet little office in DC wants to know why your infrastructure can't verify its own heartbeat. And when they pulled the logs, saw the missing trust chain, the revoked admin, the sealed HSM, they realized the problem wasn't technical. It was procedural. Ryder had deleted the one person qualified to keep them compliant and failed to replace her. And the system had done exactly what it was supposed to do in that scenario: shut the gates and lock the kingdom. They wanted a backdoor. I wasn't one. Later that evening, a second message came through. This one was clearly from someone higher up, executive legal counsel, judging by the tone. A little more polished, a little more desperate. Understand there were policies in place restricting post-revocation access. That said, in the interest of resolving ongoing compliance inquiries, we'd be grateful for any documentation you're able to share about the pre-offboarding security configuration, particularly any licensing caveats related to admin continuity. Translation: please give us a lifeboat. The ship is very much sinking. I replied once more. Attached 3 memos, copies of my risk assessments, signed and timestamped, that warned of every single thing currently exploding in their server rooms. At the bottom of the last one, I had typed a note 8 months earlier in bold. Declining escrow creates an irreversible single-point failure condition post-revocation. Recommend against unless a successor admin is validated in advance. I didn't add anything else. Didn't need to. They read it. I know they did. Because 2 hours later, the same legal rep called my phone. Let it go to voicemail. She sounded tired. Said they were hoping to engage my expertise in a more formal capacity, and that they'd ensure compensation for time and documentation efforts. Compensation. Now we were talking, not out of pettiness, not revenge, just clarity. They didn't need my advice, they needed my integrity. My name on the affidavit, my fingerprints on the files. The same ones they tried to erase now held the only bridge back to compliance. I hadn't changed. I hadn't even moved. But now, they were the ones standing outside the vault, and I was the key they threw away. The emergency board meeting was held behind frosted glass on the 27th floor, the kind of room with bad lighting, a silent projector, and chairs so ergonomic they hurt your back on purpose. Every exec showed up, including two who hadn't stepped foot in the building since before the pandemic. That's how you knew it was bad. Ryder was already in the room, pale but still performing. Shirt rumpled, tie loose. A stack of printouts in front of him like they could somehow protect him from what he was about to say. The CTO's incident report was 10 pages long and 6 months too late. He stammered through it like a high schooler trying to fake a book report. The disruption originated from a failed certificate rotation sequence, likely due to procedural misalignment post-roll transition. He used every buzzword in the arsenal: cross-functional misfire, unanticipated dependency, legacy procedural gap, all to avoid saying what actually happened. But then came slide 7, the one with my name on it. I wasn't there, of course, but I'd heard the story from someone who was, and they said it was like a ghost stepped into the room. Susan Harper, Ryder muttered, was the previous root trust administrator. Her departure overlapped with the HSM chain expiration. The CEO sat forward. Wait, she was still the trust anchor when you terminated her? Ryder blinked. We assumed we could transition to vendor control post-revocation. You assumed? The room went dead quiet. Wait, we revoked her access before the new chain was signed. No one spoke. One of the junior board members, some investment guy from a hedge fund, stood up, uttered Jesus, and walked to the far corner. A moment later, he threw up into a trash can. That's when legal spoke. And when legal speaks in those meetings, everyone else shuts up. This is potentially catastrophic, the general counsel said, flipping through a thick folder of contracts. We have 3 active compliance investigations, 2 breached SLA agreements, and a pending security audit from a federal partner. Liability protections under the vendor contract were voided the moment we failed to follow documented trust transfer procedures, which, per the audit trail, were never initiated. The CEO stared at Ryder like he was seeing him for the first time. You didn't file the change request? Ryder's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And the escrow? The CFO asked. Declined, legal said. On record. Email from Mr. Ryder marked unnecessary overhead. It's like watching a man drown in real time. No one reached for a life vest. Then came the real twist. Legal turned to the CEO. One more thing. His indemnity clause, she tapped a page, only covers standard operational missteps, not gross negligence. Clause 17A, translation, he's on his own. The air got cold. The CTO, this man who'd swaggered into my life with his modern dashboards and fintech swagger, now sat twitching under fluorescent lights, sweating through his startup chic button-up, realizing that the same system he'd tried to simplify had just signed his pink slip in triplicate. They finally said my name again, not with contempt, not with indifference, with reverence. Because in that moment, every person in that room understood the truth. They hadn't fired an employee. They had amputated the one limb keeping the body from bleeding out. And now, they were flatlining. The subpoena arrived on a Thursday, tucked neatly into a manila envelope with the kind of government seal that makes even your electric toothbrush sit up straighter. It wasn't unexpected. The moment compliance fails in a federally governed system, the audit clock starts ticking like a bomb, and everyone who ever touched a security key suddenly becomes very, very interesting. The deposition was scheduled over Zoom, neutral background, tie-less attorneys. Light small talk that vanished the second recording in progress lit up on the screen. I wore gray, same cardigan, same face they underestimated. The questions weren't hard. Yes, I was the designated root trust administrator for Tenetrix Systems from June 2011 to the date of my termination. Yes, I submitted risk assessments regarding trust continuity for all internal and vendor-facing systems tied to the HSM infrastructure. Yes, I documented those warnings in email. Dated, timestamped. CC'd to multiple stakeholders, including the CTO and legal. Yes, I outlined the consequences of terminating a root admin without appointing a validated successor. Escrow decline, logged, trust chain expiration, warned, vendor protocols. Attached. And finally, when they asked if I had anything else to add, I read from a single printed page. Last line of the last memo I'd ever sent Ryder. They believed the root of trust was a server. It wasn't. It was me. That was it. No speech, No tears, just the truth. 2 weeks later, Tenetrix Systems was formally suspended from their largest government contract pending remediation, the same contract they'd used as a selling point in every investor deck for the past 4 years. Paused, frozen, gone. The fallout came quickly. The CEO demanded Ryder's resignation. No ceremony, no final Slack message. Just an empty office and a cascade of nervous emails from what was left of his leadership team. HR lost 3 senior managers in under a week. One quit, one was reassigned, and the third just stopped showing up. Vendors pulled back. Clients began reevaluating their risk posture. And quietly, behind the scenes, people started asking the same question. How did this happen? The answer was simple. Broke the system by removing the one person who knew how to hold it together, and did so for over a decade without ever asking for recognition, just precision. As for me, my phone started buzzing again, not with apologies, not with guilt, with offers, startups, federal contractors, financial firms looking to rebuild their trust infrastructure from the ground up. One even offered a signing bonus just for a conversation. The one that made me smile came in as a text. No fluff, no flattery, just a single sentence from a competitor I'd once admired from afar. We read your affidavit. When can you start? I stared at the screen for a long minute, then leaned back, took a sip of coffee, and let the silence stretch. Because this time, they'd wait on my timeline. After all, they finally understood what trust really means. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.